Hello everyone. It's time to go through some of these damaged systems. These have all just been sitting around in the corner all sad looking since I picked them up. These are all either missing parts or otherwise in disrepair. So let's go ahead and go through them and see what's salvageable. Alright, first system is this monument to early 2000s case design. You can see we have what looks like a 3.5-inch drive bay there. Got a Yamaha CD burner here. That's very nice. And a faceplate molded floppy drive, which unfortunately does not have a drive behind it. I can't imagine the original drive was too special, because this is obviously just a random off-the-shelf case. And we got our power and reset buttons here. Yeah, this case has superpowers. We've got a very well-preserved AMD badge there, and a not very well-preserved Asus badge. I do love the blue accents on this case. However, I kinda get the feeling that this was done after the fact, because we have some overspray in certain spots, like right here. We also have a little bit here by this lower drive bay. It doesn't look like spray paint though. Maybe it was just a particularly bad factory paint job. And here's the back side of the machine. See, we have all the goodies on board, and that motherboard looks a little bit dislocated, and all of the peripheral cards have already been removed, and not by me. And here you can see the first problem with this system. I am missing that side panel. If it weren't for the fact that that's most likely completely impossible to find, this case would definitely be in a resurrection video. And this system has been pretty well stripped, but luckily we still have the motherboard, an Asus A7M266 board with an AGP Pro slot. AGP Pro was an extension of AGP, obviously. It was more designed for workstation graphics cards that had higher power demands than regular AGP could deliver, and you can still use an AGP graphics card in this slot. You just have to make sure that little tab is in place. Otherwise, you run the risk of delivering the higher power 5 volts to the standard AGP card, which is definitely not a good thing. So I'm very lucky that that tab is still in there. And it is a socket 462 board. Luckily, I have a happy, healthy AMD Athlon to test it with. And this board actually came in a dual CPU variant, but unfortunately, this ain't that. And there's our sound chip, a CMI 8738. This chip does have decent DOS drivers, and it does have AdLib and FM synth support, but I've read that Sound Blaster compatibility is kinda hit or miss. But definitely not the worst chip to have. We've got some damage on the IDE connectors, and that happens when the cables are removed and they're pulled to one side too far. But I should be able to straighten those pins and it should be just fine. That Northbridge cooler has definitely seen better days. That is very sticky. Most likely because that label was missing. That allowed the bearing to get contaminated. Alright, let's go ahead and pull this motherboard out of here and see if we can help it. Let's get this fan and front panel disconnected. Okay, I figured out why the board looked a little bit dislocated. This screw up here is actually cross-threaded or something. It's not coming out of its standoff. And they got the same issue with this screw down here. So motherboard removal is proving exceedingly difficult. Might need to take the back panel off and try to pinch that standoff and keep it from rotating. Yep, here's our culprits. These are actually stripped out of there. Definitely not the highest quality case in the world. Looks like these are just punched through and then kinda haphazardly tapped. This standoff is actually loose in there. So let's go ahead and try to grip onto that with a pair of vice grips. And then I'll try the gentle method, otherwise I might need to cut that out. Alright, that worked. Let's see if I have the same luck with the other screw. Yeah, there we go. Alright, that motherboard's free. Now I see the whole reason for that. That lower screw is coarse thread. Those standoffs require fine thread screws. So most likely somebody just tried to cross thread it home. And they probably did something similar for that upper standoff, because it felt awfully cross-threaded, and the board has a little bit of damage from its sordid past, but it doesn't look too bad. Alright, let's get that Northbridge cooler removed. It just has these little squeezy tabs on the bottom. So just squeeze those together, and then push it through. Same thing for the other one. Now I can get that off of there. And now we can see our Northbridge. Got a big ol' AMD 761, awfully dirty. Let's get this board cleaned up with an anti-static brush. Alright, I'm seeing Nichicon and Rubicon caps, so I think we're all clear in terms of the capacitor plague. Now let's try to help this Northbridge cooler. Sticky, sticky. Yeah, this bearing is so contaminated, I'm actually going to go advanced mode on it. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull that little retaining ring out. Now I can just go ahead and pull that fan completely out. That way I can actually clean the bearing, just using some IPA and a Q-tip. Yeah, pretty nasty. Same deal for the other side. Yeah, that definitely needed that. Now let's get some oil down in there. And get the fan back in. Yeah, that's a lot better. There we go, happy healthy fan. Now let's clean up that excess oil, some IPA, and I've just sealed it up with Captain Tape. This thing's done. Don't like the lack of thermal grease on that chip, so I'm just going to put a little bit of basic stuff on there. Now let's get that cooler back on. Not even going to worry about this broken plastic on these IDE connectors. I'm just going to straighten the pins. That should be close enough. Let's see. Yep, we're good. Now let's replace that dead battery. Now let's check out that optical drive. Let's go ahead and wipe that off. And it is a Yamaha CRW 2100E, manufactured April 2001. Now moving on to the power supply. I don't have high hopes for this one. It is suspiciously light, but hey, at least it supplies -5 volts, so maybe it's worth keeping around if it's any good. Well, let's find out. Power on. Alright, so far so good. Alright, that's 5 minutes. No death. Hey, I finally found a use for that ridiculously long IDE cable. Alright, got an AMD Athlon 1700 CPU in there, got 256 megs DDR1, and a known good AGP video card. Let's see what this thing does. Just short those power on pins. Alright, we are posting. Alright, these are pretty reasonable complaints. Let's see if that CD-ROM opens. And yep, opens right up. Real dusty in there though. Let's see if this thing boots Knoppix. Let's continue. Okay, we're not getting far. And I see that DRAM frequency is wrong. That's actually a PC2700 stick. That might be a problem because I don't think I have any DDR that's slower than that. Let me go see what I can dig up. Okay, well, PC2700 is the slowest DDR I have on hand. However, reading through the motherboard manual gave me an inkling that it probably doesn't like that AMD Athlon 1700 very much. I tried adjusting the clock multiplier to no avail, so I decided to swap in an 800 MHz AMD Duron. Got the clock multiplier set accordingly, so let's see if we get any better results now. Alright, the CPU is identified correctly. Aha! That's looking better. Yeah, Knoppix wants to boot. Let's see if it does. Knoppix identifies it as an Athlon. It is booting though. Alright, we made it to the graphical environment. I didn't hear a startup sound though. Let's try to play a sound.
Initiated startup sequence.
Alright, that works. Okay, well, not much else to test. I'll shut this thing down. Okay, well, apart from being a little bit persnickety about its CPU, I don't see any more issues with that board. Maybe a BIOS update will make it more accepting of newer CPUs. We'll have to see. But I do like the fact that it has that AGP Pro slot. That'll be very helpful should I ever encounter such a card. Alright, so we got a good motherboard, nice working Yamaha optical drive, and an ATX power supply with a -5 volt rail. That will certainly prove itself useful, I'm sure. And I'm gonna find something to do with that case. I don't know, maybe I'll do some kind of retro mod to replace that missing side panel. I just find this case design strangely appealing. Such a product of its time. Let's move on to the next system. Speaking of 2000s flair, check this thing out. So I initially thought that these were speakers, but as far as I can tell there are no speakers back there, so these must only provide ventilation. Not quite sure what's going on here, but that looks like an LED. I might have to get that to power up just to see what it looks like. And we've got an unbranded DVD burner here, and an unbranded CD-ROM drive. And we've got some damage here. This little PCB with the USB ports and audio jacks is kinda pushed in there. And on top of the machine we find the power button and an oddly placed reset switch. There's our power and hard drive LEDs. And check out this ultra convenient carrying handle. This case was designed with the LAN party in mind. And it's actually not too flimsy either. It's pretty solid. And here's the back side. Got all the good stuff on board, including VGA. Got 4 USB ports, got a NIC, and onboard sound. No peripheral cards in this one either. And just like the first system, this case is also missing its side panel. But we do have a CPU and RAM, and the hard drive is present, though obviously it met its demise. Looks like we got a bullet hole down there, which did not make it through the hard drive. Well, that's one way to protect your data. Speaking of data, what is this? Okay, it's a Nintendo Wii Operator's Manual. Why on earth was that in there? Very strange. There's something else unusual in there. What is that? Oh, some kind of Lionel Trains thing. This thing is just full of weird stuff. Okay. And the motherboard is an MSI K8MM-V. Socket 754, so that must be an AMD Athlon 64. And apparently these people were also trigger happy with the thermal grease, just oozing down the side of it. Let's clean that off and see exactly what kind of chip that is. Oh, it's a Sempron 3100. Let me finish cleaning that off so I can stand to actually handle it. Alright, there we go. Let's get that thing out of there. And yep, AMD Sempron. Not terribly familiar with this chip. I'm pretty sure it's 64-bit. Oh god. See, this is why you gotta be real careful with the thermal grease. See, it oozed down the sides and got on the pins. And I don't know how on earth it got in the middle there. Yeah, a few of these pins are actually coated in it, so that's gonna take some cleaning up. Alright, let's get these drives disconnected. Now let's get power off the motherboard. Now let's see what we got for RAM. And we got a Giga PC 3200 DDR1 there, with a nice holographic label. Pretty clean. Let's check out the next one. And that's an identical stick. Cool, we got 2 gigs of RAM in this thing. That's funny, those are actually different chips than the first stick. Yeah, that's funny. Although the PCB is the same. That's interesting. So this motherboard's actually pretty clean. Let's go ahead and get it out of there. Let's get the front panel disconnected. Got one of those piezoelectric speakers there. Those are always handy. No screwy screw standoffs in this case. There's something weird up there. What is that? Oh, it's one of those cable hold down things. Might as well get the I/O plate out of there too. Alright, let's do an autopsy on that hard drive. And there's the entry wound at the bottom of the case. Well, it was 120GB Western Digital Caviar, manufactured December 22nd, 2005. Let's check out that entry wound on the drive. Right through the PCB. Let's actually go ahead and pop this lid. I want to see what kind of carnage that caused inside. So physical destruction is actually the best way to dispose of data. So I definitely don't fault them for doing that. See, it hit the lower platter there. And there's actually the slug. That looks like either a 38 or 40 caliber round. It's hard to tell since it's all mangled. So yeah, that's one way to do it. At least now we know a Western Digital Caviar can stop a bullet. Now, turning our attention to the surviving drives, they're all made by Sony. Floppy drive is a Sony MPF 920Z, manufactured September 2002. We'll clean this up in a minute. And the CD drive is a Sony CDU 5211. I'm looking real hard, but I don't see any indicator of speed. I'm gonna guess that 52 in the model number means 52 speeds, manufactured November 2002. And the DVD burner is a Sony DW-D22A, manufactured January 2005. Always nice to have an IDE DVD burner around. Alright, let's work on this floppy drive. Let's wipe that dust off. Pretty dusty inside. The grease on that lead screw is definitely perished. Let's clean this thing up. Now let's clean those heads. Not bad, not bad. Now let's clean up all this old grease. And replace it with new grease. And let's wipe down those CD drives. Okay, got that CPU thoroughly decontaminated. And I also had to clean out that CPU socket because that thermal paste was everywhere. Okay, let's check out that power supply. Nothing special about it at all. Just a cheapo ATX power supply, though it too has a -5 volt rail, so that's good. Let's see if it works. This is another one of those impossibly light power supplies. Well, let's see what it's got. Here we go. Well, we're kind of high on the 12 volt rail. Okay, it's been 5 minutes and we're still kind of high on the 12 volt rail. So this definitely won't be my first go-to power supply, but it's certainly not bad. I could probably take it apart and adjust it. Okay, I'm not sure if I have a socket 754 cooler on hand. I'll have to consult the Horde. Stand by. And the Horde provides. This thing looks like a disaster, but it'll do just fine for a test. Alright, let's see what becomes of this mess. Got a DOS boot disk in there. Let's turn it on. Alright, got a happy beep. And we're posting. And we are booting. Floppy drive sounds great. And we got a driver loaded for both optical drives. And it sounds like there's a disk in one of them. Let's see which one. Ooh, might be that one. And it's stuck. Come on. You can do it. Nope. Gonna need help. Ooh, it's got some fight in it. Oh, nobody asked you. That's definitely got a perished belt or something. Oh, it's a Windows Server 2003 Enterprise disk. How about that? Guess they were running a little server on this. Well, let's see if that drives over its conniption. Yeah, there we go. Sometimes all they need is a little workout. Well, it sounds like it was working, but let's make sure. Well, I got that disk in just in time. That thing still seems a little touchy. Sounds like we're struggling. Yeah, we're definitely not spinning up. Let's see. Yep, no good. Well, you know, it sounded fine with that Server 2003 disk in it. Let's put that back in there. Ew, what is that? The spindle left a residue on my disk. So it must have a decomposing rubberized coating. Okay, that drive's gonna need some work. Yeah, I got the same thing on that disk that was in there. I thought it was just random shmoo. Well, let's see if it reads that disk. Retry. Yeah, it works just fine. Well, this is probably the drive that burned that disk. Maybe it's a little bit discriminatory. Okay, I cleaned up the Knoppix disk. Let's see what the other drive thinks. Yeah, it works just fine. Alright, that means we can boot this thing to Knoppix. Let's get all those other disks out of there. Now let's reboot. Alright, that might be happening. And this thing has pretty basic onboard graphics. Alright, made it to the graphical environment. Let's make sure the sound works.
Initiating startup sequence.
And yes, it does. Now let's make sure the NIC works. Let's go to our favorite website. And the NIC is good. Okay, that's all I wanted to test on this thing. Let's shut down.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Okay, one last thing I want to test. I gotta see what this light is all about. Looks like it takes power on this 5-volt Molex connector. So I'm just gonna plug a power supply in and see what it does. Let's see. Okay, it is the faintest blue LED I've ever seen. Let me turn these shop lights off and see what it looks like. Okay, still not quite sure what the point of that is. Maybe that LED is just partially dead. Okay, what did this system provide us with? Got a good working motherboard, CPU, and RAM, a nice Sony floppy drive, partially working DVD burner, fully working CD-ROM drive, somewhat decent power supply, and a ballistic analysis of the Western Digital caviar. That's good enough for me, and I'm definitely open to suggestions about what to do about those missing side panels. Let's move on to the next system. And next system is this unfortunately stripped case made by Enlight. That's too bad, because these are really nice cases. And this is the only bit of the outer plastic that still remains. It houses the LEDs, the key lock, and the reset switch. And luckily, it's actually not broken. Both of the clips are still there. I can actually just get that back in there. And having a look around the back, we see it's an AT system. Got plenty of peripheral cards. Got our 9 and 25 pin serial ports there. Got our parallel and PS2 mouse connector. These two are just breakout shields that connect to the motherboard. Got a NIC, and some kind of video card. And as is the theme of this video, we are missing all of the outer panels, though luckily we still have a hard drive, and doesn't even look like it took a bullet. And here's one of the cool features of the Enlight cases. They have these removable drive caddies. Just slide out like that. Let's just leave that out. These cases actually have 3 such drive caddies. We got 2 additional ones here and here. And we got some nasty corrosion up here. But I have a trick that I think will clean that up easily. We'll try that later. And that motherboard is an Asus SP97-V, socket 7. You can always tell it's a high quality case when they bother to put the ferrite bead on the front panel connectors. They were just willing to go the extra mile. Alright, let's clear these cables out of here. Got a dangling CPU fan down there. Alright, let's see what kind of video card we got. And that's an ATI Rage 2 with DVD decoding from 1997. Just needs a little cleanup. Let's put that to the side. Now let's check out that NIC. And it's a 3-com NIC. Must be 10100. Could also use some cleaning. Now let's get these breakout shields out of here. Got a very perished rubber band there. Now let's get that hard drive out of there. Couldn't be simpler. And this board takes both AT and ATX power. It's always nice to have options. And we got two 6 to 72 pin sim RAM. Let's check that out. Let's hope these clips don't break. The all plastic ones are kind of notorious for that. That's a dirty old RAM stick. Can't tell what size it is. Let's check out the other one. Looks identical. And yep, identical stick. These are gonna have to be cleaned. Now let's get that front panel disconnected. And here's another cool feature of the Inlight cases. Like any good AT case, it has a removable motherboard tray. So let's get this screw out. Then you just pull down on this latch. And the whole thing just folds out. That just never gets old. Alright, this thing is pretty dirty. And I evicted not one but 3 spiders. And I don't like the look of some of these caps. These two are bulging. But we'll see how it goes. Let's clean this thing up. Dead battery out. Good battery in. Alright, I'm gonna run an AMD K62 for testing. Jumper settings should be correct for that. And the hard drive's a 2 gig Western Digital Caviar. Now we're talking. That is the perfect size for my older machines. Let's go ahead and wipe that off. And that power supply is actually made by Inlight. So there's a good chance that was the original power supply for the case. Let's get that dust off of there. Well, let's hope it doesn't Inlight my house on fire. Here we go. Okay, doing just fine. Alright, that's 5 minutes, and I still have a place to live. Okay, I'm gonna try to boot this thing straight to the hard drive. If that doesn't work, I'll get a floppy drive on it, but let's see what it does. And immediate anger. And sounds like that hard drive's not doing too good, but I'm gonna give it a second. Sometimes those will unstick themselves. Oh, sounds like it just did. With these old drives, sometimes they just need some time to figure their lives out. It also helps to power cycle them a few times. So if you have a clicky old drive, give that a try. Okay, now let's find out what's bugging the motherboard. 1 long beep followed by 3 short beeps usually means extended memory failure. So let's go back over that RAM. I'm just gonna very carefully go over the edge connector with a fiberglass scratch pen. Don't wanna be too aggressive on these because this can take the plating off. Fortunately on these SIM modules, it's just tinned with solder. Now let's hit those slots with deoxit. Let's see what we get now. Okay, got a single beep. But no activity on the screen. That could be bad news for that graphics card. I'm gonna try deoxing those PCI slots and moving it around. Aha! Deoxit saves the day again. I actually just kept it in that same PCI slot. Alright, this thing's probably totally confused, so let's run setup. Let's just make sure it detected the hard drive. Okay, well it's set to auto, but I don't have any parameters. Let's just see if it'll boot. And boot it does. It's got Windows 95. Yeah, the little hard drive sounds good now. Ah, of course I gotta reboot. I just booted. Uh-oh, no network. Alright, we are in. Let's see what this thing has on it. It's got an old version of Office on it. Let's open that up. Office 97. Alright, let's get out of here. Let's see, what is this, some of this stuff? What is Superlink? Oh, that don't work. No. Okay, how about Bond Pro? Okay, apparently this thing's life existed on the network. How about whatever this is? This thing was very network dependent. Alright, let's see, what's Synergy? Doesn't exist. Image Center? Okay, apparently that's some kind of local service on a network that probably no longer exists. Well, they were doing some kind of database work on this thing. Alright, let's see our free space situation on that hard drive. Mostly free, probably because everything's on the network. Okay, let's try to figure out when the last time this thing was used. Okay, we're all the way up to 03 here. Yeah, it looks like 2003 is the latest date stamp I can find. The browser cache tells all, usually. Okay, well let's go down to DOS mode and run ScanDisk on this hard drive, see what kind of condition it's in. Yeah, pretty sparse. Aw, I think we found a bad sector. Skip undo. Yep. Let's hope there's not any more. Well, I think that's another one. Yep. Okay, well we're not getting out of this one unscathed, but I think we're out of the woods now. Yeah, looks like it. And we get the big scary impending hardware failure warning. 10 bad sectors. Well, I guess it could be worse. It's not like I'm storing mission critical data on these drives. Okay, let's see what old CLR can do for this rust. I've just got some on a paper towel here. I've had some pretty good luck with this stuff in previous videos, but this is much heavier rust, so this is more of an experiment than anything. Okay, well, it's not perfect, but boy, is that a lot better than it was. That only took about 15 minutes worth of work. That definitely beats sandblasting. It does take off whatever that gray coating is. I'm not sure exactly what that coating is, but hey, as long as it takes the rust off, I'm happy. Okay, this system yielded some good stuff. Got a good motherboard, video card, and RAM, a good power supply, and a reasonably decent hard drive. And these Enlight cases are kind of iconic, so it will definitely prove itself useful. I'm pretty sure all those little parts like the drive caddies and motherboard tray are almost impossible to find now. Let's move on to the next system. And here we have another gutted Enlight case. And this one was violently gutted. So we got the motherboard tray just hanging out there with various connectors still attached. It even still has the peripheral card still hanging in there. So let's just go ahead and disconnect that. And this is actually the same motherboard that the previous system had. So cool, we have twins. So I wonder if they came from the same place. And we do have a floppy drive in this one, though unfortunately it's been defaced. That's not going to stop me from testing it. And yeah, it looks like we have all the same peripheral cards. Unfortunately that power supply got bashed. Yeah, there is nothing we can do with that power supply. Even I'm not crazy enough to try to power that up. That's going straight to the parts bin. Okay, let's exfiltrate those PCI cards. And that is the same exact video card from the last system, ATI 3D Rage 2 from 1997. Though thankfully this one's a little bit cleaner. Let's check out that NIC. And yep, same exact NIC. Yeah, these systems had to have come from the same place. And the system still has two of those Enlight drive caddies. And this is how the floppy drives get removed from this case. Just have a single screw here. And once that's out, just slide this back and pull it out of there. I just love the serviceability of these cases. Really wish I had a complete one. And that motherboard tray is missing its latch, no doubt also violently removed. But in spite of this thing's violent past, I only see two problems so far. This little piece of metal on the keyboard connector is bent. I could easily bend that back. And this electrolytic capacitor has a tiny little hole punched in the top of it. Need to see if I have a cap on hand to replace it. And I do, so I did. Now let's get that dead battery out of there. These are probably my least favorite battery sockets. And that floppy drive is a Neutronics made by Mitsumi, model D359T6. Hey, even a faceless floppy drive is useful to me, particularly for cases like the first system had. That way I don't have to feel bad about defacing another floppy drive. Let's clean this thing up. And this drive definitely needs it. Now let's clean. And grease. Okay, using the same CPU, memory, and power supply from the last system, we're just going to do a quick test. I just want to see if it makes it to DOS. Let's see what happens. And same anger as the last board. Deoxit to the rescue. Alright, treated those RAM slots. Also went ahead and treated the PCI slot that the video card's sitting in. Let's see what we get now. Ooh, that's better. And we are posting. What would I ever do without Deoxit? Alright, obviously complaining about CMOS checksum. Let's just continue. And I think that floppy drive is no good. It's making a terrible ticking sound. Let's try one more time. And that's a no. Guess that floppy drive just had too much of a hard life. Alright, swapped in a good floppy drive and we're booting. And that's all I wanted to see out of this motherboard. I'm sure the rest of it is fine. Alright, another Socket 7 motherboard ready for a future life. It's always nice to have two of certain things. And I'm not sweating that bad floppy drive. There will be others. Let's move on to the next system. And the last system is a newer Enlight case. Got an unbranded DVD burner up there. Looks like it's IDE. And it's an ATX system. Got an interesting looking video card there. And some kind of sound card. Let's find out what those are. And you guessed it, we're missing the side panel. We're also missing that drive cage. And there is just so much stuff bounced around in here. There's a few other bits and bobs in there. Got a bunch of peripheral cards just thrown in there. And that's a Linksys NIC. 10100. Interesting. Got another one down here. Looks like a NIC also. Yeah, it's an Intel NIC. Looks like a Compaq original part. Okay. And yet another NIC down here. That too is an Intel NIC. Wonder if all these NICs were originally installed in this machine. Makes me think it might have been doing some kind of ghetto server duty. And what is that? Okay, it's a HDMI adapter. That has no business being in there. Oh, this board has IDE RAID. Yeah, look at that. It's got 4 IDE channels. Yeah, this is pretty similar to that 8-bit board that I pulled out a few weeks ago. Except this one doesn't appear to be suffering from the capacitor plague. Hey, we might have a good working IDE RAID board here. Let's work on getting this motherboard out of here. Starting with that video card. It's actually a thumb screw. Okay, some kind of ATI card. Looks like a Radeon. And yep, Radeon 9100 with 64 megs of RAM. Very nice. Let's see that sound card. And got a Sound Blaster Live. Not bad. Just needs a little dedusting. Okay, let's get all these cables out of here. Yeah, they were definitely using that RAID. There's so many IDE cables in here. And we got a die in there. Don't even have to roll it. I'm already getting lucky today. And this case also still has the in-light power supply. Let's get it disconnected. And this power connector's all sorts of hoop-a-jooped into the front panel. Don't know how that got in there. Yeah, there we go. Front panel disconnection time. Now let's get that beautiful board out of there. That's a pretty fierce CPU cooler. Thermaltake Volcano 6CU. Let's see what's hiding beneath it. Oh, and it's an AMD Athlon. This thing just keeps getting better. I just happen to have a soft spot for the AMD Athlon. Let's get that out of there and get all that nasty thermal grease cleaned off. Well, that was some of the most heat-stressed thermal grease I've ever seen. Still can't get it completely off. It kinda stained the die somehow. I couldn't even scrape it off with a guitar pick and IPA, so I'll be surprised if this CPU still works. Might have been overheated one too many times. Guess we'll see. Well, at least that CPU fan seems to be in good condition. Super quiet bearing. Let's get that cleaned up. Okay, that's as clean as that's getting for now. And this cooler is really well constructed. This plate here is actually made out of metal. And as such, it was incredibly difficult to remove. You can see we have some heat stress and staining on the bottom of the heatsink too. It's not good news for that chip. And that Northbridge cooler is a little bit sticky, but I think it'll be okay for now. And all of the caps on this board definitely pass visual inspection. Let's get some thermal paste spread on that chip. And this case being as awesome as it is, this is one of the simplest faceplate removal procedures I've ever seen. All you have to do is push down on this big tab here, and then the whole faceplate just kind of kicks up like that. Comes off super easily. And the 5 1/4 inch drives are on rails, so you just squeeze these two tabs together. It pulls out just like that. And here's that DVD burner. It's an A-Open model DWU 1608, 12 speeds, manufactured October 2004. Alright, in light, let's see if your power supplies make us proud again. Here we go. Yeah, doing just fine. And that's time. Power supply is good. And got a fresh battery in there. Let's test this thing. Okay, I got a 512 meg stick of PC133 in there. Let's see what this thing does. Alright, those are happy sounds. And we did post. Although it is complaining about my ridiculously long IDE cable. Guess it really wants an 80 conductor cable. But at least the DVD drive is detected. Alright, A-Open, do you open? Yep, sure does. Let's see if it reads and or boots Knoppix. Let's continue. Alright, there's the RAID firmware. Alright, looks like it wants to boot. Let's see. Graphics card and the sound card are detected. And we made it to the graphical environment. And of course I didn't hear the startup sound. Seems like none of these old machines play that at startup. Well, let's play one.
Initiating startup sequence.
Alright, it works. Now, I am curious if we have 3D acceleration on this card. These ATI cards did not play nice with Linux at all back in the day. Let's see what we get. And that's accelerated. Very nice. Let's kill that. Okay, so I really want to stress out this CPU and see if it can take the heat. There's no benchmark utilities installed on the CD version of Knoppix, and I don't have the DVD version handy. So I'm going to stress it out in a different way. I'm just going to use the random number generator to generate a bunch of garbage and send it to devnull. I'll use the dd command for that. Let's run that. Now let's open up another terminal window and run top, see if we're getting the stress we want. Alright, dd's consuming most of the CPU. Just going to let that run for a while. Okay, that's long enough. This isn't the most CPU intensive thing to do, but it did get the CPU noticeably warmer. However, most importantly, it stayed stable. Let's go ahead and kill that. Yeah, this thing's fine. Let's shut it down.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Well, this one was definitely a win. I cannot wait to play with that IDE RAID. I can just hear the symphony of old hard drives all clicking in unison now. And everything from this system works fine. Obviously I didn't test all those NICs, but I probably have more PCI 10100 NICs than anything, so I'm not terribly concerned about that. It's too bad that case is missing so much. It is definitely a nice one. And that thing is solid too. Even completely empty, it had some decent weight to it. Well, that yielded some gems. Can't wait to play with this RAID board. Now we have two socket 7 motherboards ready for a new lease on life. Definitely good on optical drives for a while. And thank you so much to everyone, especially the fine folks on Patreon. And if this is your first time here, I generally don't part out systems like this. These systems are just so incomplete that I want to make sure their parts are getting put to good use. And I have a lot more videos focused on systems from this era coming, so be sure to subscribe. But that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.